All right, guys, Eric from Marked and Made. Thank you for joining the next part of our xTool P2s Tumbler engraving video series. And in this one, this is going to be all about templates. Templates, designing the different types of designs, full wraps versus one-sided designs, pros and cons of those, alignment challenges, design planning, pretty much all of that. We're going to do a bonus topic, which is how to avoid distortion on circles with logos, and explaining templates, how they help, how to make them, as well as providing you with a link in the description to how to actually get the templates that I'm using in this video and how to use them. So what I've done here is this is a file that I have. It's a little bit of a mess because I've had it open the last couple of days of just Tumbler templates. So if I come over here, there's tons of different Stanley templates depending on if they're Pro Tours. There's a regular Stanley template that includes room for the handles. There's a regular 30-ounce template, a regular 40-ounce template, including space for the taper, and just all kinds of things that I use when I do different things. What I've deleted here is a 16-ounce template, and that's because we're going to make one here on the video. I'm going to show you how to make these and how that I use them. So you might be asking, why do you need a template? Well, templates can help you to visualize your engraving area, especially if you're making your own Tumbler design, as well as help you position items within that template. And I've done a previous video on templates before, but I wanted this to be part of this course. So we're going to cover this here. So for instance, let's start with something basic. So this is our 40-ounce tumbler. It's probably the most common template that I use. And right now it's upside down. So let's flip that around. I'm going to zoom in here so it's nice and big. This one's actually made out of several rectangles that are grouped together. What you're going to want to do is always make sure your template is not being output, and usually do it in a different color than whatever you're using for your engrave layer. This helps you to keep things visualized, keep it clean, and be able to easily select what you're working with at a moment's notice just by clicking that color and work on that. So if we go up here to the top and examine the properties, you'll notice that, as I mentioned in the last video when we went to measuring tumblers, that this template is 315 millimeters wide, 235 millimeters tall. That's the size of a 40-ounce tumbler. So this is my 40-ounce tumbler template. If you go in a little further, you'll see that these multiple rectangles make up the different areas of that tumbler. So if I wanted to put something on one side and something on another side, I could center them in these squares, which are separate squares from the actual template itself. You'll also see that we have the top segregated from the bottom here with the taper in between. So this helps when you're designing your own full wraps. If you don't really want something that is super important or a critical piece to be in the middle of this taper, it just makes it so that, it's not as clear, since you can get a little bit of difference and variation on size going through here. And if it's a key part of your design, I try and put it at the top or the bottom, preferably the top, of course. But it just helps it when you're designing your own full wraps to have that extra bit of information. It's definitely not required, but it just helps you to get started there. Now for placement, what I'm talking about is, say we were doing this on a 40-ounce tumbler and we wanted the person's name on one side, which is Patty, and we wanted flowers on the other side with a paw print. This was actual tumbler I engraved for somebody the other day in the store. This is exactly what they wanted, but they wanted it on a 30-ounce, which is why it was on the different template below. Then we're going to center both of these into the center parts of the template, and then they'll be directly opposite each other. So if you're holding the tumbler up, these ends of the lines are where your handles are. So this is under the handle at one point. This is the handle at another point at the end of the design. So since we want this to be in the middle of the side of the tumbler, imagine if you're holding the tumbler in your right hand with like the Stanley logo facing you. For example, if we were to pull over this Stanley template, right? The right side is going to be the side that if you're right-handed, you're going to be looking at. The left side is going to be the side that if you're left-handed, you're going to be looking at. But this line and this line on the left and this line on the right, these are the exact same point on the tumbler because we're working on a circle that's exactly 315 millimeters around. We're working on a cylinder. So it's important to note that if you have things touching on both sides, they may overlap if they're touching in the same spot. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're designing as well. But what we really use templates for is to keep our designs constrained, to visualize, and to separate items. So for instance, if you had a logo and you were doing a order for someone on 20-ounce tumblers where they wanted a logo on one side and the person's name on the other, this is how you would lay those out. You would put the name on one side, the logo on the other, and they'd be exactly 180 degrees apart from each other. This is on a 40-ounce template, so you would want to do that on, say, a 20-ounce template like this one down here. Rotate it around and say this was the logo of the, say we were doing cups for Duke. And then on the other side, they wanted names for each person. All you would have to do would be center those on each side, and they would be directly across from each other. On the other side of things, if you were doing on a 20-ounce tumbler, it doesn't really matter because there's no handle. But say you were doing 40-ounce tumblers and they wanted just a name and they wanted it directly in the center of the tumbler opposite the handle. That's what this center line is. So you would center the item to be engraved on this center line, and then you'd be exactly opposite the handle as long as you start your engraving at the handle, which we always do here. And it's something that I highly advocate. Always start your design at the handle. You can do that by making sure that it's facing up directly in the center of the engraving axis before you start the engraving job. If you align it like this, and then you start the engraving right here somewhere on the left or right side in the middle of the tumbler, then of course you're not going to get to the right spot. So it's important to know how to use your template, know how the templates work in relation to the tumbler and where it's actually being placed on the item, and really be able to understand and visualize how that's going to come out. To make one of these templates, it's actually super easy. This is one that I just made the other day. This was for a 30-ounce tumbler that was 280 wide by 210 tall. This is two rectangles. I'm going to ungroup them by doing Command Shift and G on Mac, Control Shift on G if you're on Windows, and you'll see that these are actually two separate rectangles. So to build a template, you're going to take your measurements, and actually I'm going to put these back together because we said we'd do it on a 16-ounce. And if you remember, my 16-ounce was 250 wide by 125 tall when we measured. So what we're going to do is you could just create one rectangle that's 250 wide by 125 tall. And if you do that, you will get one rectangle. You have to unlock the proportions first. You will get one rectangle that's a 2-to-1 ratio, and this is what it will look like. And this will be technically your engraving area of the cup. Now, if you're just doing a full wrap design, this is all you really need. But if you're doing something where you need to segment the cup into multiple spaces for maybe a logo and a name that are opposite, you're going to want this to be actually two rectangles. You're going to split the width in half. So you're going to have one 125 by 125 and a second 125 by 125. And then you're going to align those so that they're touching. And then when you grab them together, you'll have a 250 by 125 square. They should snap together very easily if snapping is turned on. Then we're going to group those together by doing Command G or Control G on Windows. And now you have one template made of two squares, so you can easily snap into the half sections without having to eyeball it. That's as easy as it is to make a template, guys. You just take the sides of your tumbler, divide the width by 2. If you need to, you can do like this one and divide the top and the bottom too. So if you wanted to split it at the top part into what's at the top and what's on the bottom, you would make 4 rectangles and take those measurements. You'll have all of these templates in the file. So I'm going to provide an XCS project and various SVGs for all of the templates shown here, one for each that I use. Just make sure that your tumblers are the same size as mine. Just because my 20-ounce tumblers from my supplier are 280 wide by 140 tall doesn't mean that yours will be exactly the same. It doesn't mean that your engraved area is the same. Measure your tumblers, double check. This is at a high level how you use templates. Now, I know that I mentioned what I would also cover in this video would be how to make circles stay circles. There are other videos about this on YouTube, but to make it simple, let's draw a circle here, and we'll say that this person's logo is actually Patty. But we want that outer circle to stay looking like a circle. So what you're going to do in this case is there are a couple of different ways to go about this. The easiest way that I've found is to stretch the width by 10%, right? So 10% of this, let's say it's 75, right? Because it is here. So you're going to want to stretch the width. You're going to want to unlock the aspect ratio and stretch the width between 10 and 15% additional. So if this is roughly 75, we're going to add another 7.5 to it, which would make it 82.5. Let's round it up to 83 wide. It's going to look like an oval on your screen, but it's actually going to look like a circle once you get it engraved. Now you can go ahead and stretch what's inside the circle as well, but if it's a very detailed image, you may not want to if it's small. You may just want to stretch the oval that's the outside, because if you engrave this as a perfect circle, then what will happen is it will come out looking like an oval on your Tumbler. If you've had that happen, you know what I'm talking about. So uh, that's how you do that. If you want to double check that that looks right, you can export this or print this out on a piece of paper, tape it over your Tumbler, and see if it looks like a circle. If it looks like a circle, then once you print it out on paper, then you're good. If it still looks like an oval, stretch it 5% more, try 15%. One other thing that I mentioned that we talk about in this course is how to set up and what the difference is between a full wrap and this one side engrave. So let me go to a full wrap file, which this one should be. And a couple important things to note here, actually. So let's sidetrack for just a second into inverted and regular images. So if you see, these two are the same design, but one is inverted, one is not. I will be doing a course on how to invert these and photo engraving in particular, but this is not that course. Just know that, and take this down as a side note, if you're doing something on a dark tumbler that engraves to a light color, you're going to want to invert the design or use the inverted copy of design if you bought one that contains an inverted copy as well. And the reason is that if you don't, it's going to come out looking inverted. So for instance, let's color this black just for a moment so you can see. So as you can see, the things that are supposed to be black or white, things that are supposed to be white or black, versus this one down here, we make it black. This looks exactly how it should look when engraved. If you're doing it on a light tumbler, you're going to want to use the regular design. If you're doing it on a dark tumbler, you're going to want to use an inverted design. If it includes things that are like characters' faces or a person's face, even if you're doing a photo engraving. If it's just text and words and clip art, it doesn't truly matter. You would use just the regular file. But you'll notice that if you get something that has an inverted copy, the inverted copy is meant to be used for the dark tumblers. Now back to what we were discussing originally, is what the difference is in a full wrap and a regular. So you'll recognize on this, when I opened this file, that this was designed for a 40-ounce tumbler based on the current size. You'll notice that our perimeter is entered at 315 millimeters, but you'll notice that our width is 315.5 millimeters. If you've ever done a full wrap and you've noticed that the edges don't connect and there's a little gap, that is because on these xTool machines, you need to add about another 0.5 millimeter to make sure that you're closing that 100%. This helps you go all the way around the tumbler and leave no gaps there whatsoever. So this only applies to what we call seamless wraps, which means they touch at both sides. This one is a seamless wrap. There are others that are like oceans and flowers and all kinds of stuff that's seamless. On those wraps, you'd want to do the extra 0.5 millimeter. If it's just something like maybe our 80s, 90s wrap, where it's not seamless, it's just a bunch of items, you don't have to worry about that. But just a quick note on full wraps and how that comes in. And if we bring this into the template over here, you can actually, I'll go ahead and align it with the template. You can see exactly where it's going to line up. So if we center this on that other thing, we'll snap it into place. Should be the same height. You'll see that it's about 0.5 millimeter or about 1/4 millimeter over on both sides, then to 0.5 millimeter total. And that's just because we go over a little bit to make sure the edges touch. So if we wanted to, for example, move this down to a 30-ounce size, all we would have to do is either use a template or just resize it, right? We can go in, we can unlock these ratios. I know that this template is 280 by 210, but then I want to add the 280.5. And you will have some wraps that the proportions just don't look right. Maybe it looks a little stretched. And in that case, you may want to edit the design or send it as it was made. For example, if we wanted to bring this down to something as small as this 250 by 125, this isn't a 2-to-1 ratio, so we already know that it's going to look a little wonky. But you can decide if that's something you want to send, or if you want to edit the design by either changing some things around, maybe making it a bit smaller, adding some other stuff to the side. You can decide that based on what you want your Tumbler to look like. So just keep that in mind. Some designers out there have planned for this and will give you different sizes in their files. We partner with several different designers, including Kayla over at Kayla's Custom Designs, Kristen over at 307 Cups, and Marie over at KWC Nation. We have discount codes for all three of their sites. They provide great files and wraps that would help you, and a lot of them provide different sizes for different size tumblers that have already been modified to fit. All right, that's it for this course. Sorry that ran a little longer than expected, but that covers how to use templates, the difference of wraps versus logos versus one-sided and two-sided engraves, how to align that, how to avoid distortion, how to create templates, and also don't forget that we'll include a link to our website in the description here. You'll be able to click that link and go and see all of the templates that we have available that we've used here, as well as access our settings sheet and other goodies as well. So please check that out. And if you have any questions, please drop them in the comments. Thanks again for tuning into this section of the Tumbler course for the xTool P2s. We will catch you guys in the next one.